Okay guys, today we're going to do an introduction to the lymph system. So I've drawn a picture up at the top, and there's a similar picture in your textbook. In here we can see this nice light blue on the left hand side, that is a venule. On the right hand side here in red here is an arteriole, and as we know, between venules and arterioles, this nice little purple stuff, we have our good old capillaries. Okay, we've already talked our blood vessel system. But intertwined with this, we have got some of this stuff that shows up here in green. We have got some lymph vessels and some lymph capillaries, which are very similar to your other capillaries. They're small. And they do mix in, okay, and in between each of your capillaries, venules, and arterioles. Okay, inside these lymph vessels, we find fluid. Okay, and that fluid inside the lymph vessels is called lymph. So you can see it here. That is just the term for the fluid inside the lymph vessels. Alright, every so often along a lymph vessel you are going to see this little bumped out portion, and in fact you can often feel them, say, behind your ears, down your neck, back of your neck, armpits, groin area is very common. And these little bumps are the lymph nodes. Okay, so a node just refers to a widened area. So those are your lymph nodes, and we'll talk about those in more detail in a few moments. Alright, the purpose of your lymphatic system is to really take up any excess fluid from inside your arteries, veins, venules, arterioles, and capillaries, right? We don't want them floating around your blood vessel system, or that would be too much, okay, for your heart to handle. So excess fluid is going to go through this lymph system. In addition to holding excess fluids inside the lymph system, we're going to see a couple of particular types of white blood cells, or subsets of white blood cells, that are called B cells and T cells. They're going to hang out inside of there. And so it's also going to screen your body for infections. Okay. All of your lymph vessels ends in one of two, okay, lymph vessels. So let me show you a picture of that real quick. Alright, the final two lymph vessels are going to empty over here, okay, into your venous system. But you can see here that we've got this little portion up here on his upper right-hand side. That's kind of the shaded red. I know it's tough to see. And the other 3/4 of his body is a nice tan color. Alright, so this last lymph vessel, okay, as it enters that subclavian there, is the right lymphatic duct. Okay, and the right lymphatic duct drains the upper right-hand portion of the body, so the upper right-hand head, chest, and then arm. Whereas this thoracic duct, as it heads into the venous system, is going to drain the fluid from the other 3/4 of the body. So you can see that the right lymphatic duct has a little bit more work to do. Or, I'm sorry, a little less work to do than the thoracic duct, which has to drain about 3/4 of the entire body. And again, all of these enter into the subclavian vein. You can see that over here, so that the fluid goes back into circulation, and then it will just continuously keep pulling out more fluid, okay, as it overloads the venous system. Alright, the one disease I wanted you guys to know about as part of this lymphatic system is edema. And hopefully you've heard this term before. It appears like excessive swelling, usually in the limbs, oftentimes in the feet and the legs, okay, sometimes other places. Edema really is just excessive fluid buildup inside the body, so that excess fluid is going to be taken out by those lymph vessels, those lymph capillaries, and sometimes it's just so excessive that it causes massive swelling inside the body. Okay, so the lymph system is actually just more than the lymph vessels, lymph capillaries, and you can see here the lymph nodes. And inside those lymph nodes, you can see I've drawn two cells, and I've sort of previewed those before. These little pink ones here are the T cells, and these little yellow guys are macrophages, right? Those are those large cells that eat foreign objects. But there are two other parts to your lymph system. Okay, this one here in blue, okay, is the thymus gland. And the thymus gland, of course, is found on top of the aorta, so inside the chest. And its primary job is to help mature those T cells. We're going to see a picture of that in a few moments. Okay, so you can help see here that it says matures, and in particular it helps to mature these T cells, okay, which are drawn here in bright pink. It is interesting to note that the thymus is very large in children, and not just because they're small. And as we age, it shrinks, okay? So as we age, okay, the thymus becomes smaller and smaller. until it is extremely small as we get older. And we're going to talk about memory cells and how they sort of take over. The third organ in our lymph system is our spleen. And the spleen does a number of things for you. Okay, so the function of the spleen is to hold on to some extra cells. So extra red blood cells, some extra lymphocytes, so extra white blood cells, and extra macrophages, which are types of white blood cells that help to get rid of foreign particles, particularly things like bacteria. So because those excess are stored in the spleen, keep in mind that that does have some immune function, okay, with this lymph system. All right, as we move forward, we're going to talk about two types of defenses. All right, our first type of defenses are innate defenses, and those really just refer to the stuff that you are born with. All right, so for example, your skin, right? We're all born with skin. That helps us to keep out bacteria, virus, and other. We all have mucus, tears, cilia in our nasal cavity, upper trachea, upper respiratory, right? All of those things are things that we are born with that help us to fight against bacteria. Also, inside of our body, we have white blood cells. We have a couple of other specialized cells that help to kill foreign invaders. On the flip side, we have what we call our adaptive defenses. And adaptive defenses are ones that we are not born with, but we gain as we experience illness, get vaccines, right? So these are things that we have to be exposed to bacteria, viruses, and other in order to become immune to those. Okay, so lastly, before we meet in class again, I want to talk just a little bit about a B cell versus a T cell. These are both types of lymphocytes, so one of our white blood cells. And these are going to help us with our longer-term immunity and not so much our short-term immunity. So remember that, we're all born with those innate defenses, things like inflammation, fever, skin, tears, mucus, right? But this is the stuff that has to be developed. Okay, so you can see I've drawn T cells here in pink and B cells here in this nice little yellow color. And both of these cells start out, okay, in part of the bone marrow. So you can see the bone here. And in fact, B cells will become mature inside of the bone marrow and then be kicked out. They will then go to hang out in those nice little lymph nodes. Okay, and I've drawn one here for you. And they will just sort of wait there. When a bacteria, a virus, or something else comes walking by and they recognize it as something harmful to your body, they will go into action and they will eliminate that. T cells are ultimately going to do the same thing in those lymph nodes. You can see the T cell here in the lymph node will also be hanging out there sort of waiting for various pathogens to enter your body, and then we can eliminate them. T cells do start as part of your bone marrow and they get kicked out, but T cells have to go to a secondary location before they are ready to go. And that secondary location is the thymus, and we just talked about the thymus. So they are not ready until they go and mature in the thymus, and then they can go hang out in the lymph system or the lymph nodes. So as a recap, right, B cells are matured inside the bone marrow, whereas T cells have to go to the thymus to become matured. So I always remembered, right, thymus starts with a T, so it matures the T cells. Bone starts with a B, so it helps to mature the B cells. Right, what we ultimately want to create, what we'll talk about a little bit more in class, is memory cells. So if we are a newborn baby or we've just never encountered, okay, any type of pathogen or a microorganism, okay, if it gets into our body, it's going to make us sick. The good news is that we're going to create some memory cells. And these memory cells, and there are memory T type and there's memory B type, will forever stay inside of our lymph vessels and our lymph nodes. And so if we are in contact with that particular bacteria or virus again, we can have a better response. So a primary response really is the first encounter, and our body doesn't quite know what to do with ourselves yet. So it's going to take us some time. We're probably going to feel pretty sick. So let me show you the graph. Okay, so here's a graph of the primary response. So you can see this one on the left here. We've never been exposed to this particular, whether it's a virus or bacteria, we'll call it a virus this time. All right, so we get sick with something for the first time, and it's going to take a number of days okay, for our body to sort of respond, and you're seeing here somewhere between the 12, 13, 14 days here before our body's kind of at peak response and able to get rid of that particular foreign invader. However, we are going to create these memory cells, all right, after this first response. So we will forever now recognize this exact same pathogen. So now that we have these memory cells and they're hanging out inside of our lymph nodes and our lymph system and in our spleen, okay, what's going to happen is, okay, when we get sick, we get a secondary response. And you can see that this one is much higher. It is much faster, okay, so that we really should not feel sick that second time, right? So primarily, we've got nothing but our innate defenses, which are okay. It will eventually get rid of it. It just makes us feel sick, and it's going to take a long time. Whereas those memory cells that we create when we get sick, okay, are going to work extremely quickly and extremely well. So we do want to get to this secondary response, okay, so that we're not constantly getting sick with the same thing over and over again, say like measles that we've seen in the news quite a bit. So this is where vaccines come into play. If you wanted to become immune to everything, you would literally have to get sick with the measles, create a memory cell to the measles. You'd have to get sick with chickenpox, create memory cells to the chickenpox, which really says something about our ancestors, right? Because this is the only way they were able to do it, was this naturally acquired way. The good news for us is we have vaccines, right? So vaccines are slightly altered versions, okay, of the illness we are trying to avoid. If they're partially alive, those are attenuated, they could be totally killed, and we're going to need to receive a number of vaccines. However, when we introduce the vaccines, the material inside there is not enough to make us ill. Okay, so we're not going to get full-blown measles, we're not going to get full-blown chickenpox. However, it is going to be enough to create the ultimate outcome of memory cells. So now we have these little cells that when it recognizes the measles virus, when it recognizes the chickenpox virus, it is going to go into action into a secondary response, and we can avoid being sick, okay, the first time through with everything in order to become immune to all of the diseases that are out there. All right, guys, we'll see you in class.